Hello and welcome to Recruiter Diaries. This week, our guest is Xiuwen Zhang, who used to be a recruiter for 5 years at the leading banks in the region before joining impress.ai as a customer success director. Hi, Xiuwen. Welcome to our new show, Recruiter Diaries, where we talk to leading practitioners and learn best practices in interviewing and hiring.
Hi, so happy to be here.
Great. Okay, so let's jump right in. First, I'd love to learn more about your experience in recruiting, maybe some numbers about around how many people you've hired and how many offers you've given out.
To be honest, it's been quite some time, but I spent about 5 years in recruitment. And if you ask me, the maybe a very quick estimate would be definitely more than 500 over these years in terms of the number of people I've hired. Generally, my domain in terms of hiring, right, have been very much in the sales function, but I do have experience hiring for like the analytics space, the technology space as well. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my recruitment experience.
And typically, how many people would you interview for any of these roles in the past?
It depends, but maybe a very good average or estimate would be 3 to 5 candidates per position.
So that's almost over 2,000 candidates that you may have interviewed over all these years. Wow,
Yes, when you
that's a
put that into
lot of.
perspective, that's a lot. I remember I had one record-breaking day when I had 7 interviews in a day.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
that was very memorable. I can't tell you how drained I felt at the end of the day, but yes, that was memorable. Yes.
So I think you mentioned to me before in our conversations that you've done a lot of hiring for sales roles. So I was really curious, what are some of the key things you look for in a salesperson?
Maybe before I answer that question, just a little bit about my approach. Typically, I'm one of the HR recruiter who loves partnering hiring leaders for hiring. Various reasons to it, but the first main foremost reason is it gives me the perspective of from the hiring perspective, the business function, and really let me have more in-depth knowledge about how the business function, the role, etc. So that's me. 80 to 90% of my interviews are done together with a hiring leader. Okay, so if you look at it, because it's a joint interview session, right? Typically, then the areas or the value that we bring in will be different. From the hiring leader, they will be covering a lot about the technical aspect. So will be from a sales position, very typical product knowledge. That will be one. Especially I was doing a financial industry related, so product knowledge is quite standard items that they would drill a little bit more to understand. And then in terms of, for example, the sales record. So a lot about how they have achieved their targets and everything. For me, from a HR recruiter perspective, I would not focus on this because those will be the technical aspects that the leaders will
Okay.
follow. Yeah. So for me, I look at a lot of the soft skills. I look at the discipline. So I look at I will ask questions related to how the person plan out the activities to reach their sales target. I will focus a lot in terms of how hands-on the person are because you would have to also assess whether this person is somebody who will require a lot of resources to help them to achieve
Yeah.
certain things. So I focus on that as well. And another thing that I followed, that I really try to get a gauge on is in terms of how the person can fit into the team. Because I do feel that in a sales position, the team dynamics, at the end of the day, when you're working as a team, is quite crucial to ensure the successful, in terms of how the team is successful. Yeah, so that's the few aspects that I bring onto the table together with the hiring leader.
So you talked about fit with the team. What are I've always been curious. How do you figure that out?
It's a lot, to be honest, it's a lot of behavioral attributes that I look out for. Like, for example, if you know your hiring leader well, you know that this person, for example, can be a micromanager. For example, so this person is somebody who likes to micromanage to the details. And when you interview a person, from the interview conversation, you can tell how the person described their past experiences. I base a lot on that. You can tell whether this person is somebody who will appreciate this kind of management style. Yeah, then you will know like whether this person fit into the team. Or if let's say you do have people who are very aggressive in nature, and if you are
Hmm.
interviewing somebody as aggressive as well, then you need to be mindful on how this individual can fit into the team. So these are things that generally from a HR perspective, I don't typically if there's no read signals that make
Hmm.
me think that this person is not suitable for the role. Generally, how I add value is highlighting these things to the hiring leader. Because from a hiring leader perspective, it's not that you can't hire, but you need to be careful. This person has certain traits that you need to look out for. So these are things that I
Okay.
look out for. Like for example, not having enough discipline, could be something that I would pick up, because by the way that the person describe their activities, you will know how diligent they are to push themselves. The motivation to drive themselves will be.
Very, very
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, that's always been a mystery to me, and now these examples really help. Um, did you have any formal training in interviewing before you started on this journey?
Uh, right at the beginning, no. Typically, it was a lot about pairing with seniors. Yeah, then gradually, the organization did put us through a formal kind of training, like competency-based approach. So we are trained in a way not to ask about hypothetical situations. That's one thing that we don't do, because a lot of times candidate can tell you the answer that you will want to hear. So the trick is always asking about past experiences. And then when they talk about past experiences, very crucial skills which needs a lot of honing, if you ask me, is to probe. Yeah, so that's something that I don't say I'm really good at it, but it's something that I continue to try to improve. Like when a candidate tells me a situation, I don't take it at face value. I learn to ask more questions to understand a little bit better. And typically, if a person is not telling you the truth, that's when you can start to see how the stories will be a little bit, they can't match the story. And the
Mhm.
reason why I like to partner the sales leaders a lot is because typically when I do this question, hiring leaders can validate because they know the role better than me at the end of the day. I'm not a good judge of whether this person really has that skill sets or when it comes to technical part. But when I ask those questions, the hiring leaders are observing and they'll be able to tell whether this person is trying to make up a story, or is this something that he or she really experienced. So we did have a lot of experience where we did join interview. We realized that the person was just coming up with a story, and the hiring leaders will
Mhm.
explain to me why by telling me that because of the questions I asked, she can tell this person is just making up a story and why. Then we will go through those.
That would have been a mystery revealed for you, I'm guessing, during those
Yes,
experiences.
yeah. So that's how I learned more and more about the role and how I'm able to catch certain things that typically maybe if you do it alone as a HR recruiter, you might not be able to catch.
When you prepare for these interviews, what is your process? Do you, especially for roles where you don't have a lot of knowledge yourself?
Mm. If for roles that like very new role, for example, product roles that I get exposed to, my first rule of thumb is to try to have a session with the hiring leader. Like we call it a job brief in the HR terms. Basically, is to find out even before you start the recruitment, right? Like sourcing and everything, right? Right before that, I will try to understand the role from the hiring leader. Like what kind of competency skill sets that person is looking for, and the industry area that would be good to find these talents by the talent pools because they know the market, they know how the industry works. Then during the then typically I will not force myself to cover the technical aspects because I know that I'm not going to add much value there. So what I will try to cover is really understanding. So during the job brief, I also try to understand the team dynamics, what kind of person the team leader is looking for, and then I also look at the role and how it can link to the organization core values. So that's the structure that we have in the organization in terms of how to guide and facilitate the interview format. So by identifying the key critical values that is crucial for this role, it helps me to guide in terms of what questions I should ask and what kind of values or qualities that I should be focusing on.
Is there skill to giving a good job brief? Any advice you'd have for hiring managers when they give a job brief?
It goes two ways. Actually, if you go Google about it, right, you can see that there will be templates that can help guide a recruiter to conduct that job brief. But typically, those are good reference point. But typically, I try not to make it like a okay. It's also my style when it comes to interviewing as well. I don't like to give the people the feeling that it's a scripted kind of interview. Like I have a list of 10 questions that I'm going to ask you, and we're going to cover that. I don't like that approach. I like to make it a lot more conversational. So typically, I do have like bullet points in my head that I know I need to cover, but I'll make sure that I don't turn it into a scripted conversation. So to me, I think the it's a lot of skills as well. How you can bridge the. I always say that from a recruiter perspective, the skill set is important because you need to bridge the gap between you and a stranger, within a few minutes into the conversation. Because how you are going to be able to add value is how you are able to get the candidate open up to you.
Did you have to make any frameworks or any special efforts or preparation to make sure that your interviews are accurate? How did you get that confidence in the accuracy of your outcome?
Okay, this one is something that I learned from my seniors as well, from the leaders as well, right? I think to be honest, recruitment is something that is a skill set. Recruiting is a skill set that is a constant development effort. I don't think that anybody is like 100% great at it, but it takes experience to hone it, and you will get better and better at it. So with experience, right, you will learn how to gauge certain things better, how to read certain signals better. So that's one. But definitely from a HR framework perspective, that is so like I mentioned, there's a structure in my previous organization where they lay out clearly what is the structure of an interview format that you can follow. They even have a script to it, by the way. So it's like a scripted kind of like interview assessment form that a recruiter can fill in. Yeah, but in general, most experienced recruiters that you talk to, right, they don't, because everybody has different style and approach in getting people to warm up to them. So the best approach is stick to your own approach, but just make sure that you don't miss out on the structure, the things that you want to cover during the interview.
Okay, so what I understand from the things you've told me is the most important thing is to make it easier for both sides to be exchanging information freely,
Mm,
especially for the candidate to share information with the recruiter freely. That is the main goal,
mm,
and then you can evaluate that information objectively.
mm.
That's the whole idea. Because if you don't have that information, then there's nothing to evaluate. I
Correct.
guess that's one of the key skills. Um, then the other thing I wanted to understand from you, and this is probably a sensitive topic to some extent, how did you become aware of your own biases and counter them, for example?
I think it helps a lot that I do a lot of joint interview sessions. That's one. But sometimes, if you think about it, that could be also confirmation bias in a way. Because you and the hiring leader could be so much in sync, right? That a lot of times are just confirming each other's thoughts. So that can happen. So we try to be a little bit more, we try to discuss a lot. So typically, what will happen is we will do the joint interview together. We will all have different set of questions that we will come in with. Sometimes I might help to add on more questions, or the hiring leader might do that. After the interview, we make sure we do a post review session together. So that's one. So we discuss about the objectively what we have seen. So on certain occasion where we are not okay, depending on the seniority of the role, as you hire more senior position, right, this will become more crucial. We have one thing that we call is in terms of a stakeholders interview. So you don't just rely on like the hiring leader HR. You make sure there's a third person in the in the equation, and this person should not have an influence over the hiring.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's
Okay.
what we look at very clearly to try to reduce the biasness in the decision making, especially as I get closer with the hiring leader, right? Like I share with you, that confirmation bias can still happen. So what we do is that, especially for senior position, right, there's also a guideline in the company that you need to get somebody that is has working relationship, because this person needs to understand the role minimally and being able to conduct a very independent review of the candidate. Yeah, so that actually helps a lot, to be honest. There are situations where I also realize that maybe me and my hiring leader has been too fixated on certain qualities, and we miss out that this person can bring different value onto the table. So there are this kind of situation where a third person in the situation can really help to bring a different perspective.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think that can help a lot of companies. That can help a lot of hiring processes, in fact, become uh, less biased, I guess. Uh, could you tell me about one of or a couple of, if available, your most interesting or memorable experiences you've had with interviewees?
Okay, there's one that came to mind. I think it wasn't a very senior position, maybe to share. It's a mid career kind of like I was hiring a relationship manager. Uh, Basically, typically, I think when it comes to sales profiles, I think a lot of people will resonate with me. They are generally very vocal. They, as long as you get them comfortable, they can share a lot of things with you. And typically, they like to exchange information, what you talk about. So it wasn't all so far. All along, I don't have any issues connecting with them. But there was one particular candidate that I struggled a little bit in the initial part, because she came in, she was friendly, but she was very cold. So there's something very cool about her that is very hard. So it took me a while to get her to warm up to me, and eventually I think we had a very good conversation. I understood her a lot better in terms of what makes her, what kind of management style she doesn't like, and what kind of management style suits her the best, and how she is at work. And when we were
Yeah.
walking out of the room, I remember, because it was a pre-COVID days, right, when we can meet up, she actually commented while walking out, "You are a very strange HR person." Then I was like, is that a compliment, or is that some feedback that I should take in? Then she was saying, no, 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 it's really a compliment. I have never talked so much about myself to a stranger before. Never. Yeah. Yeah. So uh, she's one of the candidate that I still text in to check in with her as well, on and off, because it created a memory. It created a very, it's a huge impact in terms of what she said, because it's very strange, right? That you walk out of the interview, then the first thing that the candidate tells you is that you're a strange recruiter. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a very surprising thing to hear. But clearly, she had become comfortable enough with you by that point to tell you something like that. So that's a very positive sign.
Mm. I would think so.
Have there been times where you found that you were wrong about a candidate based on your interview with them?
There was actually, like I said, it will never be a case of 100% accuracy. So I remember I was hiring a product person in the private banking space back then, and there was this candidate that the hiring leader was trying very much to push to hire, but I personally, after the interview with this person, I don't think this person is suitable for the team. Various reasons that I will not share the detail, but I did try to push back, but the hiring leader actually gave very logical reasons why this person should be in the team, and how this person can work out. And I think eventually we did hire, and I think after a year or so, I did interact with the candidate, and surprisingly this person did fit very well in the team. So sometimes I think these are things that probably it makes me reflect, what I could have caught, and also makes me be a little bit more careful in terms of what I'm looking out for in a candidate as well.
Yeah, I think anyway that's a great learning. But even in general, I think the most accurate processes are where you have external perspective, where you have multiple perspectives, and you can arrive at a balanced outcome. So in this case, obviously, that debate and that discussion probably led to the right outcome. So that's actually really good to hear. What did you like best about your job?
The opportunities to meet very different profiles every day. I kind of like that. Although it does get me tired like after seven rounds of different conversations, but it's something that I look forward to because especially when you start to interview more senior people, especially people who probably have a lot more working experiences than you, how do you then engage them to keep a conversation going and the things that you can learn from them, the experiences and all this, right? Those are very, very humbling for me, like in terms of being able to learn all this.
Are there things that you'd advise other recruiters on tips that certain things work and certain things don't work in interviews?
In general, like I shared right from the start, right? My tip is partner your hiring leaders closely. To be honest, really, because I think a lot of the HR recruiters that I've met, they some of them love it, but there's also a group that who do not like it. But I personally feel that's how you can build a relationship closer with your hiring leaders, and also at the end of the day, hone your skill sets in terms of a recruiter. Because the knowledge that you gain over the business function and the value that you can bring to the table will be a lot more once you do a lot more partnering with the hiring leaders. So that's really my personal tip.
And any things that you think people believe work but don't actually?
That's a good question. Okay, maybe how I'm being trained. This one is a can be a debate to be honest, but maybe this is a personal view. Avoid hypothetical questions. Yeah, so that's something that I generally try to avoid, because at the end of the day, um, interview candidates are also getting smarter in terms of how they are answering questions as well. So a lot of times, if you ask a hypothetical situation or a scenario, it's not difficult for them to give you the textbook answers that you're looking for. Yeah, so that's what I try to avoid at all costs. Stick to probing them more in terms of their past experiences, getting to understand their past experiences, and probing more and more to discover how they would handle the situation if it really happens, or rather how they would handle similar situations if it happens again, and not when how they will handle situation in the future. So that's
Hmm.
something that I kind of believe strongly in.
Yeah, that's very good advice because I think a lot of people would not know that. Um, that's been great. Thank you for sharing all this amazing insight from over 2,000 interviews.
Thank you for having me here.
Fantastic. Okay, Siren, I'll see you at another time.
Okay.